All right, everybody, welcome back. Hope you enjoyed your break. Maybe went outside. It is stunningly warm, feels lovely. So we have our third and final session for today. So this one is transportation, access is everything. And we're going to get kicked off with a short presentation with Leslie, and then we're going to hear from our panel. Leslie Smith started working in out-of-school time programs while still a high school student and has been working to support youth and families for the past 25 years. In her current role as an elementary specialist for Madison School and Community Recreation, a department of the Madison Metro School District, she helps to support 15 elementary after-school programs in the city of Madison. Leslie is passionate about helping families get what they need in an equitable way and creating fun, unique experiences for the youth in her programs. She's the mom to three amazing and fiery, love to hear it, daughters, and enjoys traveling with her husband, walking their two rescue dogs, and long weekends up north. So Leslie, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and share. So, some of what I'm about to share is is going to be touching on some things that you've already spent some time listening and learning about today. But we are going to talk about the impact that transportation has on participation in after school programs. So I just wanted to give kind of a quick overview of some of the things that I was thinking about. And I apologize if there's a little bit of an echo. I'm in a dance studio right now because my office mate started presenting in the meeting she was in like a few seconds ago. And I was like, oh my God, where am I going to go? So I moved down a few rooms in our building. So I can hear an echo. I hope that you cannot, but I apologize if you can, and I'll just talk quickly and be brief. Um, so today we're going to think about why transportation for after school programs is so important. What are the possible impacts of not having adequate transportation? What are some creative ways to get kids to and from after school and out of school time programs? And how can we fund this? Because I think the biggest obstacle is probably that transportation is very expensive, or it can be. I think that we can all agree we're all in this space together because we believe this, but after school and out of school time programs are crucial to families. Um, in an article by the After School Alliance, I'm going to move my little box where I see all of you, or I won't be able to read this. Um, it the disparity between urban, suburban, and rural areas, transportation really impacts the populations living in those places differently. Um, Again, we've talked about this quite a bit this morning, just about um, the resources that might be available or not available based on where you live. And this article points out that the lack of transportation, safe transportation, really impacts kids in urban areas even more. I think part of that might be because, and somebody said it earlier, families living in rural areas are dependent upon having their own vehicle. There's not maybe public transportation that's going from here to there. Um, but more than 6 out of 10 urban parents report that the lack of a safe way to get their child to and from an after school program is why their kid can't participate or why they choose not to enroll. I think I also wanted to point out, and this has come up in a few different capacities as well, but access to transportation can really create disparities. Disparities, racial disparities, socioeconomic disparities, um, and it can contribute to the activity gap. I'm sure you've heard about that before, but transportation often means access. And without access, it means that kids are missing out on important opportunities that out of school time providers can provide, like social emotional learning, physical activity, um, just a time to connect with an adult that might be, nothing against educators at all. I'm not saying that, but sometimes the out of school time providers are able to really be that bridge that connects the kid to the school day and also connects with the families from home. So there are a lot of opportunities, I think we can all agree, when a safe way to get home from program is not provided. And I really want to encourage you to look at this as an equity lens. What that means to me is that acknowledging that not having access to after school programs impacts people who are low income or geographically isolated or other just really vulnerable populations. It impacts them at a higher rate and just in a different way than families that might be able to provide those experiences or resources or things to their kids in a different way. If you have access to the resources, money to get your kid to different activities, this doesn't impact you a ton if your after school program can't provide transportation. If you don't have other resources to be able to provide those things in a different way, this might be a child's only chance to get to play a team sport or to get the tutoring help that they need. I think, again, we're all here because we believe that. So without transportation or a safe way to get to and from program, whether that looks like a bus or a cab or grown-ups to walk you or bike with you, you're missing out on things that really can enhance a school experience. And I think this has also come up, but access to the things that the school can offer, like education, like a love for learning, like finding a hobby or an activity that really you love and enjoy and brings you peace and happiness. All of those things are missed. And there really is sometimes a mismatch, especially, well, I'm not even going to say especially, but safety is a huge concern in all areas. And you know, there's a mismatch between in urban areas, there's often a mismatch between where the programs and activities take place and where the kids live and are coming from. And I would imagine that that also is the case in more rural areas, that the actual geographical space that kids need to travel to participate is larger. Students who require after-hour busing that is not available, are frequently those who could most benefit from the added support the programs offer. Those are often children whose parents work evening shifts and can neither arrange or pick up nor help with schoolwork at home. We speculate that these are also frequently children of lower income and single parent families. So again, it's impacting families at a disproportionate rate who are already the most vulnerable. So this is a very short, non-exhaustive list of reasons why no or inadequate or too little transportation might be available or not available, I guess. So a lack of funding, we know that. After school, out of school time budgets are tight. They are often, you know, kind of on the figurative chopping block when it comes to funding from the state or federal government. And transportation is expensive. And I mean, I just tried to book summer buses for field trips this summer and was like, oh my gosh, this changes the way that we program because it costs so much money. I think most of us in this space have probably heard about the bus driver shortage. I think MMSD, the school district that I work for, has tried their best to come up with some creative ways to work around that. But the fact of the matter is that the bus driver shortage is a nationwide problem, and it's forcing districts to, there's this quote on the bottom here from an organization called Hop, Skip, Drive, which is actually a nonprofit that helps kids get home from out of school time programs. That it forces districts to increase walking distance, do group stops so they can cut time and load buses to capacity. I mean, there's some pretty obvious safety concerns here, right? Too much demand or not enough options. I know that if you live in an area where there's one bus company, that's your option. And you know, they may be booked. They may have I know even here where we have multiple options, the university booked like their whole summer of activities before we even thought about it. And there's a lot of days that we are scrambling to find transportation because the approved carrier is already booked and not available. Um, and transportation can be undependable. I think that if you depend on cab transportation, you're kind of at the mercy of the cab company or the particular cab driver. And that also can be really expensive. And you end up a lot of times trying to schedule it so that the child can get to where they need to get to and in time to have dinner or things like that. And that doesn't always work out. So there's these other negative impacts that are happening when the transportation's running late or doesn't show up. So I also just wanted to really quickly talk about the McKinney-Vento Act. I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with this or not, but what it is the federal law that requires schools to remove barriers for students experiencing homelessness. And this includes participation in school-sponsored after-school programs and school extracurricular activities. This often looks like transportation home after the school-sponsored activity. Unfortunately, programs run by private organizations outside of the school district don't always fall within the scope of McKinney-Vento. So depending on the organization that you are here representing, this may or may not be applicable. And there's also other federal grants that may cover the cost of transportation for students specifically experiencing homelessness. So if you do have a family who's considered homeless, there might be other resources available specifically for that family. All right, so here's just some ideas that I have had or experienced over, well, especially I'd say over the last 10 years or so, and as things continue to change post-COVID, as we're seeing, even though we all know that's like only kind of real. So some possible ideas to help remove this barrier. And you're going to spend a lot more time hearing and listening and talking about this with our panel. So of course, tapping into federal, state, or local grants. I know here in Madison, we've been applying for and receiving the Department of Children and Families Child Care Counts funding. It has been it's been a real game changer for our programs. And I heard just a few minutes ago that they're requesting to extend that program again. So hopefully that does happen. You could implement a walking school bus or bike program. We'll talk more about this, I believe, in our panel discussion. I know something that we run into here in Madison are the boundary lines about where kids live and whether or not they can receive transportation. Just because they live within the 1 mile cutoff line or something like that does not always mean that it's safe for them to walk home. I don't know about you, but we start serving kids as young as 5 years old. And if they have to cross a busy street or something like that, that's just not a realistic, safe option to say, hey, you can walk home in the middle of winter in Wisconsin when it's pitch dark and across this very busy road. It's totally unreasonable. Sharing transportation routes and costs with other area programs. This is something that we've done in the past where we've had programs that end kind of at staggered times, and a bus might pick up here, drop a few kids off, pick up a few more, because just the limited number of actual buses and bus drivers that we've been able to, you know, access has been cut. If there's already late busing for activities happening, tap into an already existing route. I know that there are some schools or programs that do have an activities bus that leaves the school at 5 o'clock or something like that. I know for my oldest daughter, she has ridden it before, and it's like one bus that goes on a very long route. It's not ideal, but it's the decision maker between being able to participate and not, it might be worth it. And then developing partnerships with other community organizations or partners that can help to provide transportation, either literally, like a community center that has their own vans or bus, or financially. So if the barrier for your program is paying for the cost, you might be able to access a community partner, or I know here in Madison there are private businesses that like adopt a school and want to help with special projects. That might be an option. So I just want to give you, I know I said I was going to talk fast, but I feel like I did talk very fast. So I want to give you like a second to just pause and think before we jump into the panel. All right. So thank you for listening to me today. This is my contact information. If I can be of any additional support to you, please reach out, let me know. And I'm really excited to turn this conversation over to our panel of experts. We have with us here today Colleen Hayes, Jeremiah Covington, and Rachel Dieterding. They are all people I have been lucky enough to cross paths with over the last several years. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and let them introduce themselves and take it away. Thanks all.
Okay, I can start, I guess. I didn't know if we had an order to it. Hi, everybody. My name is Colleen Hayes. I am currently the pedestrian bicycle outreach specialist for the city of Madison. But prior to that, I had been working in after-school programming, also through MSCR and the Urban League of Greater Madison for the last 11 years or so. And prior to that, had worked at the Goodman Community Center as the teen center director, girls in coordinator, variety of roles there. And I'm going to talk a little bit about in a minute after we all introduce ourselves, I guess, about this idea of a walking school bus, and then some other experiences I've had with kind of trying to figure out innovative ways to solve what I think is a really huge transportation problem, especially for us at the middle school level. And I'll try not to speak too much on behalf of my colleague, Caitlin Hussey, was also going to be here from the Wisconsin Bike Fed, but she literally has no voice. It's quite problematic, poor thing. So I'll pass it on to Jeremiah, who's below me on the screen.
Hello, good morning. I felt like it was afternoon for a moment. But good morning, everyone. Wonderful to be here with you, Jeremiah Covington. I currently serve as the Community Schools Resource Coordinator for Sandburg Elementary School here in Madison for the Metropolitan School District. I've spent time as the MSCR Director here at Sandburg for about 5 years before this role. And I stepped away from the district for a year to get a small refresher just to be able to jump back in. But really excited to be here with you all to speak about, the different initiatives that have been created surrounding transportation, especially in schools or areas of which are traditionally a little left behind and not really considered or thought about. Sandburg is in a very small neighborhood who most of Madison has never heard of, but it's really nice that because of the MSCR program and different things that have come out this way, that we've been able to kind of put Sandburg on the map in a positive light to provide a more equitable experience for our families and our students.
And my name is Rachel. I also work for Madison Metropolitan School District. Similar to Jeremiah and Colleen, I spent time working as an after-school site director with MSCR. I was with MSCR for about 8 years. Now I work as a school district employee, and my title is a community school resource coordinator. which is all about creating wraparound programs and services for our students and families. And transportation is definitely one of those things that we focus on at my school. Happy to be here and happy to share a little knowledge and experience with you guys.
Okay, go ahead. I can start if that's okay.
Great. Yep, go for it.
Okay, thanks, Lindsay. Okay, so we got a couple of questions that were kind of just prompts of sorts, but there is going to be time, as I understand, for some Q&A. So if anyone has some specific questions, or I've noticed, thanks for, I didn't catch the name of someone who put definition of homelessness in the chat. So folks want to put questions or comments in the chat too. That's great. So specifically, I mean, like Leslie talked on a lot of the issues, and she kind of touched on some of what I thought were some innovative ways to solve this. In Madison, it's been really hard for us with getting enough, having enough buses, you know, and bus drivers to even deal with, especially with after school programming, especially when you're getting buses trying to get kids home from school and then trying to get after school programming as well. I was very lucky at my school. I had a late after school yellow bus up until apparently this year they don't have it. I'm not going to say that's because I'm not there, but no. But one thing that I like that you touched on, Leslie, was the idea of utilizing community centers. So that was one, having worked at the Goodman Community Center, where they have a small fleet of, 15 passenger vans and whatnot. I was still sort of, not really on their payroll, but they allowed me to drive the vans. So when there were some special events that we really were desperate, they let one of their staff members and one of my, and me take kids and use their van, which was really helpful. The one thing that I've been doing now in my new role is doing this walking school bus with kids. And this is more of a in the morning activity that we've been doing, but it's something that could, I think, translate to the evening and could solve some after school problems. I'm looking at more of a lens of middle school usually, but this walking school bus is elementary. And it's been really popular. Today we just had it this morning. There were 8 kids. We have anywhere from 2 to 8 to 10 kids. The model that we do here with the Wisconsin Bike Fed is with volunteers. And so I know we've been trying to get one off the ground with Jeremiah over at Sandburg, and it can be tricky because it is a volunteer situation. And so you're trying to get people committing to showing up first thing in the morning. I got there this morning at 6:45 to meet these kids. And, it's a quick, you just walk, less than a mile to get to school, but it's, it takes a lot to get people to commit to that every week. One thing that I have found, and I know this is a Wisconsin statewide organization, but one thing I found in Madison that worked for me when we had problems with transportation with students in after school was using the city bus system. And that was another thing where we were close enough to be able to, we could walk kids the 5 or 6 blocks to the bus stop, and we could give them bus tickets to get home if they didn't have a bus pass. So that was one way that I worked in getting kids home. Another prompt here is talking about 2 or 3 concrete things that you can do to assess the situation. One thing specifically with walking school buses, we are checking in with school social workers and finding out one of the highlights, or one of the, I'm not catching the right word, but one of the strengths of walking school buses, like kids get to school on time. Because they're meeting and they're walking. I mean, these kids that were walking to school, it's like they literally live across East Washington, which is technically a state highway. It's a major road, and we, cross through a tunnel underneath East Washington, and that gets kids there on time. And otherwise, their parents would not let them obviously cross that street by themselves. And then sometimes parents are just running late. Sometimes parents are just tired and don't feel like driving their kids. So it just makes sense to do it this way. And I would say that would be the biggest thing, is kind of checking in with school staff and seeing if you can connect with school staff and really focus on kids that might need help from, let's see, partner with schools and other agencies. And then in that way, yeah, so we are this, our school, the school we're working with is partnering with the Wisconsin Bike Fed and with the city. And so it's several different partners collaborating in this program. And then that last one, specifically talking about the walking school bus, is when they're talking about benefits. The kids that, they were a little wild this morning on the walk over. I was like ready to. There was like a shopping cart that someone had abandoned in front of the tunnel, and one of them one of the kids grabbed it and was like about to go running. And the other volunteer who's with me, she's like super delightful, but she doesn't work with kids really. She's like, and I was like, we're not doing we're not doing the St. Tammy Goo time. For those of you that know the Tammy Goo, we're not doing the Woodman's shopping cart through the tunnel anyhow. But they they ran, they did backflips. One kid pretty much backflipped the entire walk to school this morning. And so I do think that's one really effective way when they get to school. They still might have a fair amount of energy because they're excited, but at least they've seen their friends, they've taken a walk, it's like 10 or 15 minutes, and they're ideally on time. We got just barely on time today because they were really pokey, but I'm going to stop talking because I feel like I'm talking a lot, and I'm going to pass it to whoever wants to go next.
On the topic of walking school bus, I'd like to share a little bit about what I've done. So both as a school day staff, but also as an after school director. So like currently I do coordinate a walking school bus for my elementary school. We walk on average between 45 and 50 kids to school every single day. So what we did is we focused on selecting a particular neighborhood. From a school day lens, we were looking at attendance and improving school attendance. So we decided to focus on a low income housing complex near our school where the majority of our students live and where there were attendance issues. I think from an after school lens, you could also think about organizing a walking school bus route specific to a neighborhood. And I would focus on, like initially when we started our walking school bus at our school, we had 4 different routes and we only did it 1 or 2 days a week. And the biggest feedback we got from parents was that they wanted consistency. So if you're thinking about it as like an after school site director, after school staff, you may want to focus on like one particular neighborhood where the majority of your students live, if they live within walking distance, and focus on like coordinating it every single day so that parents have that consistency and that peace of mind, knowing that their students are being, safely transported from one location to another. When I was the after school director with MSCR, we lost our funding for our bus. So we went from $100,000 a year in our budget to $50,000. And we just could not make the budget work for busing. So we had to get creative, and we organized a walking school bus route for our students. We had staff walk kids to, in this case, it was mostly that same neighborhood that we're currently focusing on now. And then we had like a staff member come and like drive in their car and pick up that staff member so that they didn't have to walk back to school by themselves, just because of time and budget, and then also just safety. And then another thing I want to just throw out to the group is like, and I run into this sometimes too when I feel frustrated and things fall through. Like I sometimes have this like black and white, all or nothing type of mindset. And we've gotten really creative in the past with like, for example, just consider, we've considered like organizing a bus for only a portion of the year. So we're in Wisconsin, it gets super dark and cold in the winter. So like organizing a bus from like November to March, and then, making other arrangements for other parts of the year. So like, I just want to throw it out to the group that like, your transportation plan doesn't have to be an all or nothing or the same transportation all year round. You could consider doing just a bus in the winter when it gets cold and dark really early, when people are less likely to want to walk or use, active modes of transportation like walking or biking, and then, create a combination of transportation options. And then one other thing I just want to share of things that have worked for me in the past is like really encouraging that like social networking between families. So I was just talking to a colleague about this the other day. Like when I was a kid, like my mom knew all of the other moms of kids in my grade and my class. And that was like just sort of how things happened when I was a kid. And I feel like these days, a lot of families don't know each other. Even if they live right next door to each other, they live down the street, they don't necessarily know each other. Um, and so when you're thinking about like creative ways to get around transportation barriers, like helping create opportunities for families to get to know each other so that if you do need to help facilitate, let's say, a carpool situation, these families may already know each other and feel that trust in, contacting each other and figuring out a ride home if something comes up on a particular day or if somebody's work schedule changes. Because that's the feedback that we get the most from families is like, I don't know my neighbors. I don't know who that is. I don't trust that person with my kid. And obviously trust is earned, not given. But any way that after school programs can facilitate that trust and connection between families.
Jeremiah, you maybe want to jump in? Well, we hope for Rachel's internet to come back.
Yeah, for sure. So similar to Rachel, as an after school coordinator, one of the biggest challenges was, really kind of meet the needs of what our families were desiring. And as we all know here in Wisconsin, with, you know, the winter season, transportation gets a little bit tricky. And of course, it's very dark out. One of the initiatives that we tried here at Sandburg was incorporating, and we had our own bus for a short period of time, but the need isn't very high typically just because of the proximity of where our students live within walking distance mostly. So one of the things that we were afforded was being able to have staff kind of walk students home, similar to Rachel. We didn't have the luxury of the walking school bus during the time as when I was a coordinator here, but that's an initiative that we're working on currently in the way that we've kind of compiled and are looking to structure our route is according to the students that have, a tremendous amount of tardies, or are pretty truant and things of that nature. So we've used, generated lists from school day to mostly come with a idea towards how to best structure our routes to succeed and to help out our families and to give the students the ability to comfortably move around their neighborhood and their community safely. During the time that we were walking students home and after school, we saw a very alleviated level of comfort for our families, especially for those younger students that second grade on down. The family members typically are unavailable during that second shift part of the day to pick up. So they really were appreciative that, we were able to have staff walk those students home and to help assist with getting everybody home safely. I know that in, the kind of the list of questions here, what secondary or hidden benefits might a program see from a child and family after they've met secure transportation. One of the things that we saw was you know our students were much calmer. There's a lot of anxiety that surrounds kids and going home for whatever reason. Maybe that's transportation, maybe that's living conditions. We do have a very high amount of students that are in our TEP program or, experiencing homelessness. Where Sandburg is located, we have um, pretty much a string of hotels of which our TEP students were residing in during that time. And while it would assume that it would be, pretty easy for those students to walk home, that wasn't the case. And because of, them being within a mile radius, it didn't really qualify for any transportation for a bus and also for the TEP program to provide cabs. So it was a little tricky with that. but we were able to come up with a plan from um, a part of our social work team in our after school, and collaborated on being able to, within the school day budget, cut out a little expense for students to be able to have cabs to transport them from school to those hotels. As you can imagine, students living in those hotels, families are piled up into one room. There's, again, lots of anxiety surrounding those conditions, and we saw a lot of behavioral issues surrounding, you know, after at recess, after snack time, as students are getting ready to prepare to go home. But once we were in a secure place with not only the TEP students, but the students that uh, were being walked home by staff, the behavior began to change. And not only did it really affect school day, but I think that, just the intentionality of having somebody in their corner surrounding getting home, or, getting to school. We didn't have the for school childcare here, which Sandburg is traditionally, as a school, done a really great job as a community of being able to manage a lot of those things themselves. However, um, you know, we did see it start to pay off dividends, that, students built up a better trust in not only the staff that were working with them, but also peers that live in their neighborhood. Um, Unlike some other neighborhoods, Sandburg's community has a lot of different levels of uh, not only poverty, but also, middle class and upper class neighborhoods as well. So while we think that students may have some type of understanding, or uh, have knowledge of the people that live in their community, it wasn't the case here. So it's very interesting to kind of watch that all to unfold. But the thing that was the most beneficial, again, was by, us being very intentional about making sure to make those kids comfortable. It paid off pretty greatly for us.
Colleen, I'm wondering if you want to talk a little bit more about the bike stuff. And if I could, I know I'm not technically on the panel, but if I just wanted to share an example of something that we did in one of the programs that I support. We worked with the Wisconsin Bike Fed program to offer a biker safety program for a group of students. Throughout the program, they're including Caitlin from Wisconsin Bike Fed, and the MSCR site director worked really hard to get a bike donated for every one of the kids in that group. So at the end of the program, we had a whole group of kids who received a bike and a helmet, and were able to safely, because they had all done all this practicing and group bike rides and things like that, during their after school program, and learned about the laws and what you should do and what you shouldn't do. They got to keep their bike, and that's like such a great way to get back and forth from school in a much faster way than walking, especially if you and your friend just got a new bike or whatever. So
Yeah.
Colleen, I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're lucky in Madison. There's a couple organizations in Madison that in the Dane County area that provide free bikes for kids, including Free Bikes for Kids. It's the actual name of the organization. And Wheels for Winners are the two that come to mind right away for me. What I like about with the Wisconsin Bike Fed, and so they've been working with both of those organizations to help get some bikes for the kids. What I think is crucial is the part where you talk about that we had the kids actually took kind of like did a bike rodeo, learned how to ride their bikes. And maybe not necessarily, I think most of the kids already sort of knew how to ride a bike, but they don't really know how to ride a bike from point A to point B. They can, Kelly, they do often provide locks. Yeah. Kelly just asked if they provide locks. They provide locks and helmets for the kids as well. And I think that other piece that sometimes is missing with some kids will get a bike, and this isn't like to dog any organization or anything, but like Free Bikes for Kids, sometimes they'll just give, they'll give bikes to an organization, which is great, and then to distribute it to kids. But then the kids might not know how to best, take care of their bike, or like how to do basic, like, the ABC safety, like how to check for basic, if there's enough air in their tires and that sort of thing. And then also learning, like you were saying, the skills to ride a bike from your home to school. I was at Mendota last fall, and those kids were learning, they had to go through the whole process before they got bikes, and that was kind of cool. I can say for the middle school level, coming up in May is this Bike and Roll to School month, so we're trying to encourage schools to get students to bike or roll, or walk or roll rather, to school. And when I've had bike to school days at Whitehorse Middle School, which is bikeable for a lot of kids in our neighborhood, but has to cross, they have to cross some busy streets in some of the other parts of our our attendance area. Once kids actually bike to school, they're like, oh, well, that was kind of fun and that was easy. So like if you kind of incentivize it initially a little bit, and then kids actually realize it's a little more fun to actually ride their bike to school with friends in the nicer weather, rather than sometimes ride a metro bus to school and deal with all the shenanigans that can go on there, or get a ride from their parents or whatever. It's like, oh, this is fun to ride a bike. So it was kind of cool, because after we had our first bike to school day, this was a few years ago, pre-pandemic, these kids are just like, I'm gonna ride my bike every day now to school. And I'm like, okay, see how easy this is, but they needed like that first incentive, like, oh, it's gonna be a party, you're gonna get a bagel if you ride your bike to school. And then they ride, or scooter or whatever to school, and then end up getting something, and then oftentimes they'll continue doing that. So we have in Dane County, Safe Routes to School is through the Wisconsin Bike Fed, but I know in other parts of the state it's through like local governments or local school districts. And so I think that might be a way for folks to kind of look into who might be, checking in if there's a Safe Routes to School program happening in your area, and seeing if they have some ideas about how to get more kids on bikes. Because you're absolutely right. Obviously, it is a much quicker way than sometimes even taking the bus. Because if you're a kid that has to worry about taking the bus, and like you live pretty close to the school, but you might end up being one of the first kids to get picked up, and then you go this roundabout way. And I remember I had to take a kid home. This was years ago, and I worked at Sherman Middle School, and I had to drive a kid home, and I was like, okay, how do you get there? They were like in 8th grade. They gave me their whole route via the Metro City bus. And like, I could have been, gotten them home 10 minutes earlier, but I had to go, like, that was the only way they knew how to get home. So, that's kind of a cool thing too, to also give kids, maps, and showing them how to get from point A to point B. And then also one thing that came up when we were talking about it, especially with elementary level kids, was this idea that kids learn how to ride, they have a bike, they feel really competent, but then their parents are not really that on board of them riding. And so we were talking a little bit too about getting parents involved with bike safety, and getting them, because I think if a parent is kind of very nervous around bikes and they're uncomfortable being on a bike, then they're going to project that possibly onto their kid. I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but I think, yeah, just getting, and I can look into too, and I can let Lindsay know if I know of other organizations throughout the state that are similar. I didn't do a lot of research on other outside of Dane County, but other parts of the state that have kind of bike giveaway programs like that, because I'm sure there are.
Rachel, did you want to add anything else now that you're back?
Yeah, sorry about that. Can you guys hear me?
You sound
Okay.
great.
Yeah, my home internet just like collapsed on me, so I'm back on my phone off of Wi-Fi. So thanks for welcoming me back. So I missed a little bit of the conversation. But yes, I totally agree with what Colleen is saying. I think like, like when you're a kid, having your access to your own bike is like freedom. That's like your car when you're a little kid. And so, but I also run into those same issues of parents being concerned about bike safety, kids having a bike but not knowing how to tune it up, kids having a bike but not using it because they don't have any way to lock it up, and bikes get stolen a lot in our neighborhood. Or kids having a bike but like no other accessories, like no little bell or whatever. So I think that there's lots of opportunities to like connect with local bike shops. You can be creative, even if there's not an organization in your community that is doing the same thing as Free Bikes for Kids is doing in Madison. Connecting with local bike shops, like getting to know your neighborhood. Like there's always like some guy in the neighborhood who's fixing up bikes. There are people in every community that do those things that might not have like an official business. So I think that there's a lot of good opportunity um, in that way for sure. And yeah, sometimes riding a bike or other active forms of transportation are much more convenient than riding the school bus or riding a city bus or, trying to arrange a ride somewhere. Um, let's see. The only other thing, so I made a list before I joined this meeting about like creative things, like creative workarounds that we've done in the past. So I just want to take a look and see if there's anything else. Oh, I did want to share. So one year, and this might not be so applicable this year because we know a lot of our busing issues are with like just not having enough driver availability within a bus company. But we did have an issue several years back where we couldn't keep a consistent driver. And I was like, what is going on? And I talked with the transportation company, and it turned out like the root cause of that was student behavior on the bus. And so we did some like pretty swift workarounds where like we just arranged for a school staff to be the bus attendant on the bus to have that like level of monitoring that our students needed and that relationship that they needed. And then we just made sure that we like really very much like communicated with the bus driver regularly, and that any issues were followed up on swiftly. So if it turns out that, that is a barrier to having consistent bus transportation in your program, that's something you could consider. I was the bus attendant 2 days a week. And I was like, okay, everybody is going to be communicating with your parents. Let's figure this out. And then we also created like an incentive system for good bus behavior for our students as well, where they got to earn something. Um, so, I really encourage everyone to like think about your partners in transportation, whoever they are, whether it's the bus driver, whether it's parents picking up and dropping off, whether it's, city buses, and thinking through some of the logistical considerations of using those different modes of transportation. I'm a big fan of like surveying people as well, or having conversations with people to kind of do like an overall like transportation audit for your program, whether that's like it depends on what your program setup is like. Like at my school, most of our students live within walking distance of the school, but transportation is still a big barrier because there's concerns about safety in the neighborhood. So like we've done walking audits in our neighborhood. We've had like staff take the city bus and like actually experience what is it like to get from school back to home and to see those barriers. And I think like it seems kind of silly, and like it it's like labor intensive in the sense that it takes you time, but like that experience is invaluable, I think. And it really helps you be able to see transportation barriers in a new light, and then be able to think about how can I address those to create access for people. Um, yeah, so that's all I have to add there.
Great, thank you. I think we'll open it up for questions if that's okay with our panelists. Questions or other ideas?
I think something that I feel is really important to add is, really being intentional about talking to families and hearing directly what their needs and their thoughts are. Oftentimes, in the guise of finding solutions, we will sometimes neglect the voices that provide the most insight. And a lot of families are more or less willing to, work with you. They just, traditionally just need to be talked to. So one of the things that, we've done here in my current role, with the walking school bus specifically in mind, is be really, you know, open to the feedback that parents are providing, including them as potential volunteers, asking for, them to come in and have chats with students and have, chats with their kids outside of school as well, around safe practices with transportation because, um, we can only do so much in school, but the wraparound care is what's really important. Is if one message is being given here at school, it's perfect for the message to also be given at home, so that there are two spaces of which of course the child feels comfortable with their school staff, but to be also comfortable with understanding what their plan is at home. I think is super important as well. So surveying families, asking specifically, what ideas they have, what concerns they have. There are things that happen in our neighborhoods that parents and families are more tapped into, and maybe those things are not really shared with the school openly. So being sure to reach out and ask those questions is super vital and important.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Jeremiah, and that's is aligned with something that Stan said during his recorded presentation too, is like not making assumptions that we sort of know what's best and making sure that we like actually follow up and get information and hear from the people who actually have the needs and have the experiences instead of just like coming in like, well, I say this is a white person coming in like a white savior, like I've decided how to fix the problem for you. I mean, that's just like it's really condescending and it doesn't really build trust and relationships between yourselves and your families and the communities. I see Kelly has asked a question in the chat. Has anyone used outside businesses or funders to assist with transportation costs?
So I have actually. So this weekend I partnered with our after school director at my school and we took 75 people to Milwaukee on an all-day field trip. And we we got a donation from a private business. So there are a lot of like in the corporate world, there are a lot of organizations that will don't make a corporate donation to nonprofits or schools in particular. And it's all about like networking and thinking about like what personal or professional connections do you have or other people at your school or your organization may have. In this case, we negotiated that donation for our bus, which was $1,700 for the whole day, by the way. And that came from a parent of a student who was going on that trip who works for a transportation company and was able to like facilitate that connection for us. So that's another possibility. A lot of corporations make donations to nonprofits or schools as like a tax write-off. So, and also, sometimes they have certain things that they really like to fund, whether it's children and families or education or something like that. So, but oftentimes the primary motivation is that tax write-off. So, you know, I feel like the best thing that organizations or site directors can do is like be willing to talk to people and share about needs, and share like what a donation, like what the impact of a donation may be, and then just see where your network allows you to go with that. But yeah, it's a great suggestion of ways to recoup transportation costs for sure.
And it's also just a good fundraising or development strategy to give your funders something specific that they can support. I think sometimes we're just like, we just need money for we need money for everything, right? And all money is green, it's all fungible. But I think like it's more exciting as a donor or benefactor to be able to like, I paid for this specific thing, like I paid for the bus for this thing. That feels more tangible and more real, and like you can really see where your dollars are going. So it's a great strategy for sort of motivating partners and donors.
Yeah,
Brittany has some,
absolutely. Oh, sorry. The only other
no,
thing
go
I would
ahead.
add there too is like, if you can put a cost on like it costs this much per day to transport kids home from our program, and like if you make this donation, you'd be covering this many days of transportation for a kid. I feel like that's very motivating for donors, and it makes them feel good. Or even if you're approaching multiple organizations and you're like, hey, do you have September and October? I got somebody lined up for November and December. Like, feeling that sense of connection and like seeing where they fit into the funding strategy is really powerful for people.
Yeah, great advice. Brittany's also asked a question in the chat, it's a really interesting one. Do you think that a walking school bus in the morning motivates kids to want to get up and go to school? And she mentions a few families who expect their school-age kids, elementary-age kids, to sort of get up and go on their own and don't necessarily check in to see whether the kids have gone to school.
I can share a little bit about that since we've been doing that for several years. I would say yes, and I think it's because it's that consistency and kids not having to be afraid of like unsafe things that might happen on the walk to school. So like before we started our walking school bus, we did a walking audit of our neighborhood and we surveyed families and students. And the biggest concern that we heard from students was that they were afraid of being hassled by adults on their walk to school, which really surprised us. It surprised us. Well, it was disappointing, let's put it that way. And so for kids who are expected to get themselves up and walk to school in the morning without necessarily a check-in with a trusted adult, I think that can be really hard. And so we've noticed a huge change at our school. And I think it is motivating because the kids know what to expect every day. They know who's going to be walking them to school. And they're not worried about like conflict with peers or with other people in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I don't have the the prior knowledge of the compare contrast from, you know, pre and post of our current walking school bus, but I would say very much so. I think, you know, whether that actually like kids make themselves get up and, you know, like this morning we had a couple first graders. I'm pretty confident their parents got them out of bed, or someone, an older person at their house did get them out of bed and sent them on their way. But I do think they prefer, you know, that's kind of like a fun activity because we only do it once a week, as it currently stands at this particular school. And so I think for them, it's just kind of a fun weekly activity that they get to do. I think it's similar to like, you know, like you're saying in May with the walk and roll to school month, you know, providing kind of an incentive and making it exciting for kids. And so like at our walking school bus with the bike fed, we end up doing like a monthly, you know, we did like a winter walk to school day. We did one at Sandburg. And then we did a couple other schools as well and provided hot chocolate, which wasn't that exciting, but it was kind of really exciting, and lots of families ended up walking to school and really enjoyed it. And it was in the middle of December, you know, so it was cold out, but they still had a nice time. And so at Hawthorne, we've been doing each month, we pick one of the Tuesdays to do kind of like a special event. I even played my trumpet during March to School Day last March, and very poorly because it was literally 14 degrees outside, and so I was really having a hard time. I was having a hard time, and I'm only at the 6th grade level, but they still came back next week for a walking school bus, so I didn't scare them too much. But yeah, I think having, thanks Jeremiah, I think having that, you know, like the incentive to get kids to show up every once in a while, you know, and I mean, just then they realize the real incentive is just getting to hang out with their friends.
That's awesome. A lot of great ideas there. Okay, we have time for one more question if we have one. It's an honor, Colleen, to meet the unofficial mayor of Madison. I did not realize I'd be in such esteemed company today. Okay, Rachel Sharon, do you have any last minute logistics wrap up things to say before we close out?
Just thank you to the panel. And then if everyone can stay on, we do ask that you answer just 5 short questions for us so that you can give us some feedback for next time too. But thank you to all of our panel members. This was amazing. Lots of specifics and helpful tips that I think we're all going to take away from this conversation.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. It was great learning from all of you. I am inspired by all the things that I've heard, all the creative ideas, and how many ways you sort of make do with what you can to do right by kids and their families. I think it's just really incredible. So I really, really appreciate it. And just a reminder to the rest of the participants here today that we will be doing the second part of this in 2 weeks on April 25th. So same time, same place, some of the same faces and some new ones. All right, thank you all. And yep, there we go. And the poll is now there for everyone. So those of you who are participants, if you could fill that out about just to let us know how things went, we'd really, really appreciate it. Really take that feedback seriously. And when we're done with that, you can go on and enjoy the rest of your beautiful Tuesday.